What's up, Steve? How you doing,
Oh,
man?
I'm doing really good, really good. Um, as you probably know, the first edition sold out, and currently having a second edition printed. Those books should be here 2 months at the outside. I'm hoping, you know, more like a month, but calling it 2 months. And yeah, man, it's been great. Sponsor's been amazing. Uh,
So what's
I did.
changed? Just the cover, pretty much, right?
Um, so it's going to have a new cover, which I've kind of put out there. It's out there online, a couple places. It's another Lozauer photo. The back cover is sort of basically the same, but that picture, that black and white from Day and the Green, is now in color, which is what it was originally. Another Lozauer shot. I just wanted it black and white. I just wanted the first book to have black and white on it. It's funny, man, because um, writing the words, I never thought about them being read. Certainly not by me. So as you're watching some of that, I tend to, stumble over a bit. It's like again, the words are meant to be read and not spoken. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool, and people said they liked that parts, where I kind of, where I talk directly to you, so I'm not reading text, and it's kind of like, well, and so yeah, so there's some more segments of that coming. I don't know how many are up and out there. I know there's one, maybe two, but there's five in all. So those are coming as well. So yeah, man, I'm glad you dug that.
So what year was it that you met Ed?
I met Ed actually the first night. That first night the whiskey was 77.
77.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I think it was June 77. Uh, as I write in the book, I went to the whiskey a lot back then, and the idea, honestly, of just going out to see another band at the whiskey didn't thrill me. But I got an invitation. It was from from Columbia. Cheap Trick were recording a live record. I thought, wow, Cheap Trick recording a live record at the whiskey. That's worth seeing. So I went there that night to see Cheap Trick with my brother, and I'm there, and a girl kind of taps her on the shoulder, and it's Michelle Meyer. Michelle was someone I'd known. I was playing in bands back then, trying to be a
So is that what led you into recording bands? Doing interviews?
yeah. I mean, look, man. I always wanted to be a guitar player in a rock and roll band. I wanted to write songs. That's really what I wanted to do. Um,
We all
yeah,
do.
exactly. And look, I was never an amazing guitar player, but I was a pretty good guitar player. I was good enough to kind of write stuff, and I was writing songs, and I thought the songs were pretty good. Um, it was just a tough road, man. It was a tough way to earn any money. So I always had like the journalism thing going on.
Did you go to college for journalism?
I went to UCLA for a year, and actually in the book I write about my experience at UCLA. It was a nightmare. The guy who taught the creative writing class was just total. He was an asshole. Um, you know, wasn't supportive in any way. Told me, hey, you're a better, you think you're a better writer than you are. You're never going to make it as a writer, man. Give it up. All right. So I left UCLA after that first year.
What year would you say that was?
That's a good question. I graduated in 71. So I think that was the end of 72, which is right around the time I started freelancing, or at least trying to get stuff printed. So I had no contacts. I didn't know anybody. It's not like I could go and interview Peter Frampton. I mean, I didn't know how to interview Peter Frampton. I didn't know anybody at a record label or the publicist. So, but what I could do is I could buy a ticket and go to a show and write a live review. So I was writing live reviews, and it's funny. I remember sending them to Guitar Player, and Guitar Player writing back saying, "Hey, the writing is good, but we don't run live reviews." So that made me feel like an idiot. It's like, come on, Rosen, get it together. Know enough about the magazine you're sending to know if they, run live reviews. Finally got a little live review printed in like this little local, it was like a soft core, a soft porn like newspaper. It's like the kind you get like out of the like those little kiosks, and in the back would have like all the massage ads, which is what they used to have back in the day. I mean, it wasn't like
Oh yeah, I know what you're
filthy,
talking
but it
about.
was like I mean, you were buying it to find these massage ads, not to go read some article on a review of a T-Rex at the Palladium. But this editor, wrote published a little review. Now I could use that as a stepping stone. So now I could approach a label and say, hey, look, I had this review printed. Could I get tickets to some show? I loved music, man. I loved collecting. I loved reading. So I thought, well, how can I combine all these things? And I remember getting an issue of Guitar Player magazine, really early issue. Remember there was a Dickie Betts interview in there, and I thought to myself, you know what, man, I could write that. I could do that. You know, um, I thought I could do that. So that's when I started sending out reviews, and then you get on like one label, and now they're sending you records, and now I could do record reviews, and you're getting invites, and it kind of snowballed from there. But I always loved music, like I said, man, I wanted to be a guitar player in a rock and roll band, wanted to be a songwriter. And I actually saw the journalism as the door to getting in there, because I mean, as a music journalist, you're hanging out at the labels, you're meeting the managers.
It almost seems like that movie, Almost Famous. You
Yeah,
ever seen
yeah,
that movie?
you know, I know Almost Famous. I knew Cameron a little bit. Cameron was, much more successful than I was. But yeah, that's kind of what it was. I don't think Cameron ever played guitar. I think, it was a little different for him. But yeah, he hit it big time. But yeah, man, that's what it was. Being around all these musicians and stuff is like, oh, fuck, man, I want to go play at the Santa Monica Civic. I want to write songs, So, yeah, that's how that thing started. What do you want, man?
Did you ever talk to Don Landy at all, by chance? Anything?
I talked to Don in the studio. Every time I was up at 5150, Don was there. Early and late,
Yeah, he played a huge part in Van Halen's sound. He don't get enough recognition for that, I
Don
don't
was
think.
an absolute integral part to what Edward.
Yeah, you never really hear anything from Don or anything about it at
No,
all. I'd
because
like to hear what Don would have
Don's
to
a pretty
say.
quiet guy. He keeps to himself. Very quiet guy. Um, for him, it was all about how, how can I help Edward Van Halen realize his vision. Yeah, so I got to know Don kind of, look, we never had long conversations, and it's not like we were friends, but he saw me up there, and he accepted me into that little world of he and Edward, and he felt comfortable around me, and for that I'm eternally grateful.
Did you ever feel like they were going to give you the cold shoulder or anything? Like, you were the media in there or anything?
I never ever felt that way from Don. With Edward, it was always like, hey man, I'm going to work on my music now. And I knew that Edward was sort of, he had left the kind of hanging out with me mode, and now he was into his music thing. And I took that as, okay, Ed, see you later. And I took off. So you have to understand, so I'm interviewing Ed, in 78 and 79 and 83 and 84, and the band's getting bigger, and they're putting out records. So he and I were doing interviews, and so he would tell me stuff, and then he'd say, hey, don't print that, because he was telling me stuff in the moment. Maybe he was talking about Mike, or he's talking about Dave, or he's talking about a manager or something, stuff that he wouldn't have told other writers, and after he said that stuff to me, he realized, don't use that, don't put that in print, and I never did. In 85, I don't know if you know, Dan, I was going to write Edward's authorized biography. right? So we signed a simple little contract. I, Edward Van Halen, give Steve Rosen the right to write my authorized biography. No other writer can do that, blah, blah, blah. So that was pretty unbelievable. So from that point on, I started interviewing all kinds of people, in preparation for the book. So when he was saying those things to me, don't print this, don't use that, he was not only saying it, don't use this in any articles you're writing, but don't put this in the book. At the time, I was thinking, hoping that yeah, the book was going to come out. I started working on 85. I was hoping 87, 88. I'd work on it for a while. Then I'd sit down with Ed, do more interviews, and we'd come together. So when he was telling me these things, it it was sort of happening in real time. In other words, when he was talking about Mike or Dave in 85, that was going on in 85. So fast forward 20 years later, after I last speak with Edward in 2003, and I start writing my book, and I come to these sections and it says, don't use this, don't print this. I included his comments in the book because I wanted readers to understand how private this stuff was at the time. So people said, well, if it was so private, why did you print it? Why did you use it? And I said, well, first, because I wanted the book to be as honest as possible. And for me to cut those bits out, I was going to be lying to myself and you, the reader. But secondly, you, the reader, have to understand that Edward told me that in 1985 or 1984 or 1982, when if it came out that, Michael Anthony wasn't working as hard as he should have been on bass parts, and that was out in the press, that could have been disastrous for the band. Warner Brothers would have screamed bloody murder, So that's what people don't understand, that he told me those things. What is 85, 95, 45, 47 years ago? So people think I was betraying some kind of trust. And I go, no, you don't understand. For 17 years, I kept that trust and I included it in this book because I wanted you to know these private parts, these feelings that Edward Van Halen had. So
He had a whole life outside of music. People don't realize that too often. He did have a personal life.
absolutely. And people ask, well, how did you become a friend with Edward Van Halen? Or more succinctly, why did Edward Van Halen become friends with you? Man, that's like saying, how did you become friends with your best buddy?
He obviously valued your opinion and trusted what you said. So,
That's a big
I
part of
mean,
it.
they
That's a
speak for
huge part of it.
themselves, pretty much.
And those are the key elements. Why do you have a best friend? Well, you trust him and you respect him. And with Ed, he trusted me and respected me. And beyond that, of course, there's a shared love of music. I loved guitar players. I could speak to him about the guitar. I mean, look, man, I'm not going to begin to tell you that I understood everything he was telling me about his amp setup or his pickup. He could talk to me about his guitar playing, about his approach to guitar playing, his songwriting, and I understood every part of it. And that's what I think I really brought to all the interviews I've done with all these guitar players over the years, man. I understood them really, really well, and I
Right.
think they sensed that. So, yeah, man, trust and respect was huge with Edward. The other side of that, however, is Edward was also, in a lot of ways, he would take the path of least resistance. When he was looking for a singer to replace Dave, I mean, he had said to me, "Hey, man, find me a singer." I mean, the reality is, and this is kind of common knowledge, Ed was like never best friends with Dave. They weren't friends. They played in a band together. They were out on the road 10 months a year. But, you know, and those differences, they get bigger, and it does come with success. And, I mean, look, a lot of it was behind closed doors. I don't know exactly what went on. Yeah.
I've
Yeah,
always
yeah,
enjoyed the
Sammy was
Sammy
great.
years. I like
He brought a
Sammy.
different, obviously creatively, he brought something different.
Did you ever interview Ted Templeman or have anything to do with Ted?
Never interviewed Ted, never met him. I think we traded emails once, and that's about it.
Yeah, Ted's another big one. That was a big part of their sound.
Yeah, well, Ted was um, Ted was essential to Van Halen. I mean, I mean, Edward is either saying how much he loves him or how much he hates the guy, and how much Ted doesn't respect him. And yet Edward kept reaching out. Ted would keep coming back and producing those records. So there was something in Ted that Edward felt he needed. Thing about him coming over to the house is just so surreal. He was still living with his parents in Pasadena. It was pretty unbelievable, man. It was pretty unbelievable, and um, yeah, him being over at my pad, and I mean, I had a cool little pad. I mean, it was a cool little guest house up in the Hollywood Hills, but it wasn't, it wasn't anything great. I thought it was cool, but then coming over, I'm thinking, oh God, what is Edward Van Halen going to think, and but I don't think it even registered with him. Honestly, I think he could have walked into you know, a, a huge house or my little 800 square foot guest. He he just didn't see those things. The only thing he saw, oh fuck, there's a Strat in a stand. Let me go play it.
Yeah, let me just start taking it
Exactly.
apart too. Oh, you don't need this knob on there.
Exactly. That was so great.
So, do you remember what possessed you to record these interactions? I mean, did you have any idea this was going to happen?
Again, I think he was coming over for an actual interview. So of course I would. I had no idea he was going to play guitar. Look, I was hoping he was going to play guitar. And I write in the book. I always kept my guitars and stands in the front room. Kind of the main living room, and he was going to see those because that's where we were going to sit on the couch. I didn't want him to think, oh, what, why is he putting those guitars out? I'm not going to play, or conversely, him thinking, oh shit, this Rosen must be a really good guitar player or something. Again, I didn't think like that, and he made it so comfortable. Look, as comfortable as it could have been sitting there with this guy you recognized as being the second coming of Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck. I mean, I
So, I mean, you must have knew that he was special right away, right? I mean, you
well,
must have knew.
I'll be honest with you, Dan. I also write in the book. When I first met Edward that night at the whiskey, I had never heard Van Halen play. I had never heard Edward Van Halen play, which is weird because they were playing the Starwood and the Whiskey, two clubs that I'd been to, like I said previously, many, many times. I had never seen him play. That's 77. Uh, um, 78, when he comes over to the house, I still hadn't heard him play. He's playing these riffs for me, and I mean, I was blown away, but I didn't know what they were. So that first
So, you're talking before the first record even came out.
exactly. So that first record wasn't out yet. The first record comes. I might be getting my chronology wrong. Anyway, I had never heard Edward play. The first album comes. I was on Warner Brothers list, February 1978. The first Van Halen record comes. And I remember it was the Manfred Mann record also in there, and a Little Feat record. And I remember the Van Halen record, and I go, oh God, that's that guy, Edward Van Halen. This is his band. I'm going to put this on. So I put it on, side one, track one, dun, dun, dun. And I'm listening, I'm going, yeah, that's okay. I was not blown away. I kneel drop over the rest of the songs and go, yeah, it sounds like, man, I hear a lot of Richie Blackmore. It sounds like Deep Purple on speed, really fast shuffles. I was not impressed, man. I was simply not impressed. Um, I had heard so much about the band. I'm thinking to myself, dude, you are missing something. What aren't you hearing? The next day, I put it down, put the record on again, sat down and really listened closely, and then realized, oh my God, that's what people are hearing. They're hearing Edward.
Eruption.
Yeah, man. I, I, it took me a little bit of time, but I got it. At that point, I realized, yeah, guitar playing would never be the same after that. You know, um, the tone, the sound of guitar, uh, those kinds of runs, obviously the vibrato bar, obviously the tapping thing. Um, I mean, notwithstanding, realizing later on that he had built his own guitars and played those guitars he built. Look, it's one thing to build a guitar. It's another thing to actually play that guitar. Yeah, this was graciously sent to me by Mike Tempesta. Mike was in a band called Powerman 5000. Worked with Anthrax a little bit, but currently is artist relations for EVH, Fender, and Charvel. And he had seen the book, and I sent him the book, and he was, so gracious. Anyway, man, he sent me the guitar, and I thought it was so cool. It's a pretty accurate reproduction. Obviously, it's not this exact guitar. I mean, that specific guitar. I know it's hard to see, but I mean, they copied it. I thought he went to three springs later on. I could be wrong. But the thing is, as little as I play guitar, I like a floating vibrato bar, so it was really kind of effortless kind of a thing. But I mean, it really takes, a little bit of, you know, hand strength that, with two springs in there. Obviously that's what he was accustomed to. But yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I played some of his guitars, up at 50, and I never thought they played that great. I mean, it's not like
It was set up the way that he wanted to play it,
exactly,
though. Like nobody can tell
exactly.
anybody else who to set their guitar up. It feels good for each person. Has their own preference, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. But yeah, so again, I want to, give a shout out to Mike Tempesta for sending me a beautiful. Yeah.
What bands was Ed listening to at that point in time? Like, who was he listening to?
You know, I tried to figure that out a lot, and those were conversations I wish I could have pursued more with Edward. I write about it in the book. It's one chapter. It's called "The Van Halen on Vinyl," and Ed was over at the house, and I don't know if he'd ever seen my record collection at that point. So basically, I lived in this little guest house. And you walk in, it was kind of like a front room, a little kitchen area. There's a little fireplace. You walk down a hall. There was a little bathroom on the right, and then down a couple more steps was like a little bedroom in the back. So you wouldn't see the bedroom from the front room, which is where we always were. So I don't think he'd ever. Again, I don't think he'd ever seen my record collection. I said, "Hey, you want to see my records?" He goes, "Yeah." So I walked down, and I had a huge record collection at the time. I mean, I had like 8,000 or 9,000 records, which is more than most little record stores have. I mean, there were
Yeah, that's a
a
lot for
shitload
sure.
of records. I mean, stacked against every wall. I mean, lots of records. It was an amazing collection. And so I don't know if Ed asked me about anything, or I said, Ed, maybe you want to look for some stuff. And I don't remember what happened, but I just started going through stuff, picking out stuff I thought he might like, you know, that he might listen to, and not that he was gonna, be influenced by somebody, but he might hear something that might trigger something else, or trigger an idea in him. So I remember I pulled out some Larry Carlton solo records. Larry was a studio guy, a 335 player, an unbelievably talented player, way different than from what Ed did. But I thought, he might listen to some of that and hear some stuff. I think I pulled out a Steely Dan record, and of course he knew who Steely Dan was, but I don't know how deep his knowledge went. I mean, he knew the hits,
Well, I'm
you
sure
know,
he was listening to the radio. I mean, he couldn't avoid it at that
exactly.
point in
But I
time.
don't think he really
Yeah.
it went beyond that. So I wanted to hear some of the, the album cuts. I actually remember bringing out a Les Paul record, and I think I brought out some, more prog records because he was into that kind of stuff. I remember him talking about UK. Holdsworth was in the band. Bill Bruford from Yes was a drummer. So I think I might have brought out a record, by Supertramp maybe. There's another English band called Gentle Giant. But I know that at the end of the day, I mean, I gave him, probably 50 or 75 records. And, it's like I kept waiting to hear from, hey, man, I listened to that record, and I didn't dig that, or hey, I listened to that record, and that was cool. And I never heard any of that. And I'm pretty certain he never listened to one record. The thing is, he never gave me my records back. So he still owes me my records. I'm kidding him.
Well, maybe if Wolfgang's watching this, he can give your records back. Come on, man, give Steve his
Owes
records
me my
back.
records. I'm kidding.
I mean, to be fair, you did give them to him. You said, "Here, take these." So, maybe you won't get them back. What did you think about Patti Smith joining the band?
Look, I think stylistically it could have worked. She's a really good singer, a lot of attitude. A female fronting Van Halen, I don't know, but I've been wrong before, but yeah, Ed was talking about it. Was talking about that. So he dug Warrior, and they were kind of a melodic rock band. Yeah, we were driving. Actually, it might have been coming home from that gig in Detroit. Valerie picked us up, and again, this may have been another trip. I was on airplanes with him a few times, but a Bryan Adams song came on, and he loved this. He loved Bryan Adams. He talked about Robert Palmer.
I wasn't aware of that. Oh yeah, I've seen him cover that "Addicted to Love" before with Sammy. Yep, very cool.
He dug that. And if you think about all the songs that he covered, all those bands, from Grand Funk to Sabbath. I mean, we know he loves Sabbath and Cream and ZZ Top, but there was a lot of other stuff in there. They'd cover songs like a band called Budgie, an English trio, pretty interesting. A band called Zephyr, which was a band, early band that Glenn Hughes was in. Did a song by Spirit. So yeah, it's hard to know what he was listening to or what he was influenced by. I wish I had more of those conversations with him. Yeah.
So, what's your favorite record that Van Halen did?
That's a good question, man.
I'd have to go with Fair Warning for sure.
I might have to go there as well. His playing was, oh my God, it was like, it was like the first three records, and then I went a little further, because he had a lot more time to work on guitar and guitar parts and solos, and there was more overdubs, the music was more realized, it was more orchestration. It was
yeah, it was darker. It was just a darker period in time, all in general.
Which he didn't understand. He goes, why do people call this a dark record? Are they just looking at the cover, And it's funny, I remember in one of the solos in one of the songs, I go, man, yeah, that's really angry sounding. Were you an angry young man that day? And he kind of laughed, I mean, I think the description kind of,
every picture I always see, he's always smiling, always looks happy to me.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't think he considered himself an angry young man. It's just the way this stuff came out. Look, he says it's not an angry record, but yeah, they were going through a lot of shit.
I mean, they were growing up, like he was getting more mature,
Yeah. So I think that ultimately did come out in his playing and the songwriting. Um, that's a pretty unbelievable record. His guitar sounds are just.
Do you think technology held him back at any point back then? Like, do you think he was ever held
I
back
don't think
any?
so. I think it's the other side of it. I think he. I think he could have been in a 24 track, fully loaded, every piece of good in the world, and he would have played the same. Um, I think that only really came to fruition your um, uh, vision of him on the 1984 record, right? So there you hear a guy in his own studio with all the bells and whistles, with an incredible board, every outboard piece of gear you could imagine, and you hear, the guitar now jumps up to this next level, and
So where do you think the tone chaser came from? Do you think that Ed was unhappy with his sound? That's why he was always constantly messing with things and trying to get a different tone? Like, what do you think it was?
I believe that's true. That doesn't mean that he listened to a record and go, "Oh fuck, that sounded like shit." I don't mean to say that at all. I just mean I guess like any pure artist, there's something in them that's kind of never satisfied. Um, and yeah, I think his tone would have morphed into something different. Look, it still would have been Ed. It's his fingers on the fretboard. It's always going to sound like him. But yeah, I mean, the famous "If I May Be So Bold," and this is where I got the title for the book when Ed made this remark. So, another amazing Slow Hour photo. I love that photo. Ed's kind of surrounded by guitars, but he's kind of.
He always looked so cool, man. Like, he
Oh, he
always
looks
looked too cool.
unbelievable. In fact, I asked Neil. I said he never took a bad photo in his life. He goes,
He
no.
always looked like he was ready, He was always
Exactly.
perfect.
I mean, look, I mean this in the first way. He was a beautiful looking guy. I mean, let's face it. I mean, he had the most amazing hair. He had cheekbones and the smile.
Did he work out or what? Like, he was always in good shape,
The only thing he ever told me he ever did was jump rope. And that's how God, his arms were fucking.
Always in shape, man. Always in shape.
He was I never saw him out of shape. And again, for a guy who was pounding down beers, I mean, my God.
I got you one right here for the Van Halen fans.
There you go. I mean, how many? I mean, I don't know how many calories are in a can of beer, but there's a shitload.
I don't know. I don't think it says on here. Let me look.
Maybe they didn't.
Nothing.
Yeah, they didn't have to. But yeah, so he never got that alcohol bloat kind of a thing, But in answer to your question, so when he said this line, that's when I knew I'd found the title for the book. I'm a tone chaser, and I'm always chasing tone. It's that elusive thing you hear in your head that you just can't quite get. So I thought, wow.
So you don't feel like he was unhappy with his sound at all?
I mean, I think ultimately at the end of the day, I don't know if unhappy. It was just, yeah, maybe dissatisfied is a better word. And I know that he did spend a lot of time working on riffs. I saw him do that. Just work a riff and work a riff and work a riff. However, the recording process was pretty fast with him. Once he had it down, I mean, he talks about, those first, at least the first record. I mean, I was done, I don't know, a couple of weeks. When I picked up the guitar in front of him, he could have said, he could have said anything and I would have shriveled up and died. You know what I mean? It's like, and fair enough. I mean, but it was the opposite of that. It was like he was encouraging. It's like he was oblivious to the fact that he was playing guitar with this guy, and it wasn't, Betancourt or Steve Lukather or some brilliant guitar player. You know, so my point being is, yeah, he was aware of my opinion the same way I was wholly aware of his, and he was aware of his opinion and how it affected me. I believe it because he could have said the smallest things, and I just would have, it just would have hurt. When I picked up the guitar in front of him, he could have said, dude, he could have said anything, and I would have shriveled up and died. You know what I mean? It's like, and fair enough. I mean, but it was the opposite of that. It was like he was encouraging. It's like he was oblivious to the fact that he was playing guitar with this guy, and it wasn't, Betancourt or Steve Lukather or some brilliant guitar player, So my point being is, yeah, he was aware of my opinion the same way I was wholly aware of his, and he was aware of his opinion and how it affected me. I believe it because he could have said the smallest things, and I just would have, it just would have hurt. And I hope that some of the things I said to him, or did with him, or did for him, meant something to him.
I'm sure it did, man.
I hope so. I
I'm
hope so.
sure it
That
did.
would, that'd be
He
nice.
obviously valued your opinion and looked at you as a friend, I think.
See, that's the really sad thing. Um, uh, all of that information, all those secrets, all that stuff, everybody wanted to know. No one will ever know. And the only person that really knows any of it, or the biggest part of it, is Alex, right? Alex is his brother.
Do
Alex,
you ever talk to Al by chance? Like, you ever interviewed
did
him?
I ever interview him?
Like, do you talk to him now? Like, anything to do with him?
No. Uh, I had a good relationship with Al back in the day. Talking about Al, so I interviewed Al for that book, but our relationship was good. We had a good relationship. A moment happens later in the book. I don't want to give this away, where Al says something. It's when they were doing the tour in Europe with Bon Jovi, and they opened for Bon Jovi. Al had made some comments about Bon Jovi. I printed them, thinking it's cool. At that point, it got into a thing. Yeah, Al was very unhappy. Ed let me know that Al was unhappy. I never spoke to Al after that, so that was 95.
I'm sure he can't still be mad, man. It'd be worth a shot trying to reach out to him.
Yeah, well, he wasn't joking this time. So, yeah, unfortunately, no, I haven't heard from him. Al, if you're listening, I apologize again. I love you. I hope you're okay. Let's talk.
So, just to be clear, he did know you were recording and gave you permission for this, right?
He did. And I write specifically in the book, Edward said to me at one point, when we're working, when talking about the book, and I think maybe even before then, I can't remember what I wrote, but he said, "Hey, record anything you want. I don't care if so he did say that. What I wish I had done is that I recorded more. I wish that I had sat there with my little $3 microphone stubbed in his face every second I was with him. But you can't do that, right? I mean, but there were conversations, he would call on the phone, and I reference it in the book. We talked for 6 hours. I think he was on the road, and he wanted to talk to somebody. I believe that's what it was. And again, Edward always called in the middle of the night. That's why I call a lot those tapes the Twilight tapes, because it's always at 2 in the morning. Yeah, exactly. So he had just done a gig, or he was up in the studio, and I mean, he was a maestro. He truly was. Look, I've been around the greatest guitar players who ever lived, in my mind. I've missed some, okay, granted. But, I've been around Jeff Beck and Jimmy
Jeff Beck's a
Page,
phenomenal player, man. Phenomenal.
Jeff Beck, and I've said it before, and people got mad. Well, how can Jeff Beck be your favorite guitar player if you wrote a book about Eddie Van Halen? Well, Jeff has always been my favorite guitar player, and I always describe it this way. I think he was the greatest guitar player who's ever lived. I think Jeff could have played anything. I think Ed was the most influential guitar player who ever lived.
Got your book, Steve, man. I thought I'd show you.
Oh, you did? Excellent. So everybody who sees that, that is the first edition. And there you go. And I do want you to know that every signature I do, I know people aren't going to believe it, is a little different. It might just be a curly Q or the length of a something, but I've tried to make everyone different. Guys try to do the same signature. Not me, dude. I want everyone to be singularly different so it
Do you
appears as a
sign
work
them
of
all
art.
or just
Right?
only on request?
Good point. I only sign upon request. Even though I think most people will probably want me to sign it, some people don't. And some people might say, oh, you signed my book I didn't want to sign. So if you want the book signed, please ask. I'll happily do that. That edition that Dan just showed everybody is sold out. And I thank everybody who supported me and got the book. Having the second edition printed, new cover, new back cover, text is identical. That book will be here in 2 months. At the outside, I'm hoping less. Book will be the same price, $35.
I'll put a link in the description for sure.
For shipping. You can pre-order the book right now because there's no books to be had. Normally the books are on Amazon, Reverb, eBay, and Etsy, but there's no books. You can pre-order the book from me at paypal.me// whatever that is, Tone Chaser. paypal.me/Tone Chaser. That'd be great. And you have to type in your address where it says notes. Because if your address isn't in there, I've got to go chasing after you on the PayPal site. And unless you see my note to you on PayPal, sometimes it'll take weeks for you guys to send me an address. So type in your address and please send the payment as friends and family.